Hi, and welcome to Classical Stuff You Should Know, a podcast about classical world, ancient things. We're reading Aristophanes. We're reading Aristotle. We're going way back to the ancients.
This is great.
Where we...
What year? Yeah, when?
And it's stuff you should know.
Yeah.
And we talk about it. I don't know the year. My name is Graham Donaldson, and I'm joined with Thomas Pointed Question Magby.
Hi.
And AJ Secret Recording Hannenberg.
That's me. So no one's going to know what you're referencing.
I know,
though.
but now, I just said it, now you're like, no one's going to know, and now we're going to tell them.
And now, pointed reference. So,
That's right.
yeah.
This is why we should include it at the beginning. Anyway, I hit record before Graham was ready, and he was recording text to his wife.
I was telling her I forgot to form the bread at home, and I was telling her how to form it into a boule. And
what is a boule? What is that?
Hannenberg?
It's a loaf of bread, typically a round one.
It's called a boule?
It's called a
What's
boule.
the name for that?
Yeah. It's Francais.
La France, yeah.
La France. Anyway, so I recently was made aware that I have sense and motion.
Oh.
And I...
Just figured
yeah.
it out,
I mean,
too.
I probably knew it all along, but I sort of I realized it pretty deeply.
Yeah.
And so it threw me for a loop. I have no idea what its deal is. And so I wish there was a book that could tell me about my animation and my and whether it's based on a large number or not.
Whether your soul is numbers plus movement.
Yeah. Actually, I was reminded of this Aristotle episode where he's talking about the soul being linked to number when Plato in his Republic talks about the beginning of the end of the golden society is when families stop having children according to the right prime number. There's a perfect time to have a child.
What time is that?
The first prime.
When AJ starts, it's ridiculous. If AJ's got a Plato book kicking around here, I can find it. But Plato basically says when people stop realizing the right time to have a children, and then he has this huge paragraph talking about how the numerical time, the right time to have a child based on numbers, and you will get fortunate and happy children. But parents aren't always going to do that. They're just going to crank out another. And then you're not going to have fortunate and happy children. And that's the beginning of the end of the aristocratic society. And then it's just chaos ever since. Anyway.
Was he serious about this?
I don't think he was. I think he's being funny.
Okay.
But it's hard to tell with Plato sometimes. Anyway, do you have Republic kicking around there?
Oh, yeah.
All right, well, you do your intro. I'll see if I can find it.
So it's right up there next to Boethius. We record in my classroom, for those who don't know this. I don't know how we got here. How did we get here?
Something about prime number. Oh, the soul. The soul having numbers.
No, soul is numbers
also...
and movement. Okay. In any case, this is part 3 of my series on Aristotle's De Anima. And oh man, as I was putting this episode together, it's just...
Do you regret this?
I thought I could do it. I was like, I got this. I went in so confident, feeling myself just I've read a lot of old books. I can understand. I feel so far out of my depth. There were whole chapters I read, and I was like, it's
what
all.
is this? Yeah.
It's like reading the dictionary. I can't, except I understand the dictionary. It's just a word salad that means nothing to me.
Is this part 3 of 3?
This is part 3 of 3. This is the last one. Hallelujah.
Because when you first started this, you talked about a 5-part series. So we're paring this down.
No, it's 3 books.
Right, but I think some of them might have taken longer. Right, I don't know, but
maybe I should have done it in 5 parts. But there are parts that just make so much nonsense. It's just so much nonsense that I cannot talk about the chapter because he's comparing the soul to divisible and indivisible lines and segments and points and concave versus it's just total gibberish.
Speaking of gibberish, I think, do you have the...
I found it. I mean, so Plato does it too.
Yeah, give it to me.
Okay, this is the beginning of the end of the city.
Okay.
Up to this point, we had the perfect city, and then Plato says this. But seeing that everything which has a beginning has also an end, even a constitution such as ours will not last forever, the constitution being this city, but will in time be dissolved. And this is the dissolution. In plants that grow in the earth, as well as in animals that move on the earth's surface, fertility and sterility of soul and body occur when the circumferences of the circle of each are completed, which in short-lived existences pass over a short space, and in long-lived ones over a long space. But to the knowledge of human fecundity and sterility, all the wisdom and education of your rulers will not attain. The laws which regulate them will not be discovered by an intelligence, which is alloyed with sense, but will escape them, and they will bring children into the world when they ought not. Now, that which is divine birth has a period which is contained in a perfect number. But the period of human birth is comprehended in a number in which first increments by involution and evolution of squared and cubed, obtaining 3 intervals and 4 terms of like and unlike waxing and waning numbers, make all the terms commensurable and agreeable to one another. The base of these, with a third added when combined with 5 and raised to the third power, furnishes 2 harmonies, the first a square which is 100 times as great, and the other a figure having one side equal to the former, but oblong, consisting of 100 numbers squared upon rational diameters of a square, i.e., omitting fractions, the side of which is 5, each of them being less by 1 or less by 2 perfect squares of irrational diameters, and 100 cubes of 3. Now, this number represents a geometrical figure which has control over the good and evil of births.
That's a great point.
If
So
you
when
work
you-
that out,
if
does
you-
it draw chicken? Or
So I don't know. So if you do that,
we gotta look this up. I bet
No.
somebody has actually drawn this figure.
So if you do that, then if you have a child according to this figure. Now maybe it has to do with the stars. Maybe it has to do with like aligning when you have a kid according to the stars. But it seems like Aristotle, a student of Plato, came by this crazy math stuff by honestly, right? If he sat through lectures like that.
It's like, and it made sense to him, right?
And
then-
Aristotle's like, of course, I can't believe I had a kid in December.
All right. Yeah. So what he just read was what certain chapters of this section were like, all the way through, beginning to end. Just, it's okay. I think I'm at the point where I generally understand what he's trying to say, and so I'll be reading a few excerpts here and there. I will skip the parts that have to do with old arguments that we really don't engage in anymore, stuff that has gone away because now we understand better how the sense organs work and better how, say, sound is transmitted through air.
Can you give me like an example?
Well, he talked about how certain senses are connected to certain things. So the ear is connected to air because it's composed of air, and it gets the senses that are unique to air. And then we have special sense objects which only relate to one of the senses, but most are common sense objects, which means like I can see a cake, and by virtue of seeing it, I also kind of tell that it's sweet, even though I'm not actively tasting it. And both air and water transmit color, so color is common to both. It's just a whole lot of talk about the mediums and how things come to us, but we just understand better how things come to us. Like he thought that color was transmitted through the air because it's transparent. Well, we know that color, yes, it does come through the air, but you don't need air to see color. We've been to space. And we see color because of light, right? We understand better how light works. It's just wrangling over things that we don't really wrangle over anymore because we understand better how these things work.
Gotcha.
Is this all, like you'd call this a scientific work from Aristotle? Like his views on the soul come from his like observations of how things are?
Yeah, and part of it is just trying to figure out how the human mind and body works, and human bath and body works. So some of it is just now totally irrelevant, right? Where we're like, okay, he didn't really fully understand how the senses work. For example, the whole first chapter, which I'm going to skip, is talking about why there are no other senses than the 5. And he kind of attaches it to the mediums and touch and that sort of thing. Well, the truth is there's lots of stuff that we don't see. There's ultraviolet light, there's dark matter, there's all kinds of radiation that we cannot see via our senses at all. Like we have to use some other thing to get it to the medium where our senses can take it in. So in that sense, I think he even notes that there are a few organs that certain animals have where they can sense things that we can't, but I don't know. So I'm going to skip that first chapter, the chapter that talks about no other senses other than the 5. And I'm going to focus, I think, on the stuff that, number 1, I understood, and number 2, that seem relevant to the audience. Is that fair?
Yes.
Okay, so skipping chapter 1 of part 5, because it's to establish that there are no other senses of the 5. He jumps into chapter 2, which is what it means to be aware of sensation. So, for example, your eyeballs see color.
Yes.
Right? So they are in the act of seeing. What does the realizing of that? Like there must be something outside that sort of says, I am seeing now, and collects all that information and kind of codifies it. Right? And he says, well, so it might not be the eye. If it's something outside the eye, then it like collects and codifies all that information, and then there must be, you could go infinite regress here. Now that's collecting it. There's got to be something else sort of bringing that together. So he's like, why not just ascribe it to the first in the series? So the eyeball not only sees, but kind of realizes that it is seeing. while I think now we better understand how that stuff is transmitted to the brain, which is the seat of all this, he doesn't seem to think that the intellect has any specific organ. I don't know what their thoughts on the brain were, whether it was just like soup in your skull.
I thought it was that the heart was like that sense-making organ, and the brain was like a radiator, like it like warmed up liquids and stuff. Like
Yeah.
yeah.
I'm not sure they nailed it. I don't know if they had the physiology correct. But this is where we get into some actually interesting philosophy about how he tells that there must be something else other than just the sense organs.
Mm-hmm.
So we can perceive separate things at the same time. So say if I am seeing something that is white, I know at the same time that it is not black, and I can do comparison there. And I can also compare between that whiteness and, say, bitterness from my tongue. And I can do that simultaneously while I am seeing the white. And so there must be something sort of other than just the sense organs that is gathering all this together. Right? Modern science would say what that thing is.
Big Excel spreadsheet on the inside.
A big brained Excel spreadsheet behind your eyeballs.
It's just like all the cells all the way down.
Well, yeah. So I'm going to read a quote about it. So in this way, it becomes clear that flesh is not the ultimate sense organ, right? So whatever your body is, it's not the top guy. To suppose that it is requires the supposition that on contact with the object, the sense organ itself discerns what is doing the discerning. So your eyeball would have to be the one figuring out what is discerning which thing. And he's like, that's ridiculous.
Right.
No more indeed is it possible that it should be by separate things that we perceive that sweetness and whiteness are the objects of different senses. So we have to have one thing that perceives that these two things are different, right? Because if it was different things, there would never be a meeting where I could say that is whiteness, that is sweetness.
Right.
Rather, it must be some single thing that they are manifest to. Otherwise, from the mere fact that I see one thing and you see one thing, it would be obvious that those things were not the same. Whereas it can only be a single thing that asserts their difference. Sweetness, then, being a different thing from whiteness, is the same single thing that asserts them to be so. And as it asserts so, it does both think and perceive. Clearly, then, it cannot be by separate things that we discern what are separate. This was one of the clearest passages that I read.
So there's something discerning between all these different senses.
So there's a central discerning thing.
Yes, there's some sort of central discerning thing that can take in all of the sense information and discern between the things, even from different sense organs.
That is because the eye is never going to be able to sense
taste,
right?
Exactly.
So I cannot look at whiteness and say that is different than taste without something that brings those two together. Does that
So
kind of
when
make
I
sense?
look at a white freezy and I say, okay, is that going to taste like pineapple or is that going to taste just like
Is a freezy like a Slurpee?
those things that come in the plastic tubes that you have at kids and they
what
cut
are
the
those
corners
called?
of your mouth.
Freeze pop.
Flavor ice.
Freeze pop.
That's flavor ice.
Flavor ice.
That's flavor ice.
Flavor? Yeah, flavor
What?
ice?
No,
Flavor ice is the thing.
freezies.
Hey, look, y'all are all wrong. I don't
Freeze
even look.
pop.
No, look up.
Freeze. No,
Guys.
it freezies.
Guys.
Freezies.
Flavor
ice.
Flavor ice freezer pops assorted in tropical flavors.
Yeah, and they come in these long,
Yeah.
skinny
Yeah,
tubes, and
Fun pops.
And when you put them in your mouth, sometimes you can cut the corners of your mouth
Sometimes
because
yeah,
they're a
the
little
plastic is
sharp.
right there.
The plastic's
Yeah,
sharp.
okay. Yeah.
Yeah, we had
Freezies.
Freezy pops.
Okay.
Freezies.
I'm really tracking with this now that we got this down to popsicle.
Anyway,
level.
but if I'm looking at the white one,
Yeah.
I can say, "Ooh, is that going to be pineapple, or is
Right.
that just going to be like generic
Right.
sweet?"
Yeah.
And you don't know with your
don't know.
kids just by looking at it.
So it's got to be the brain, right? Isn't he talking about a brain?
He's got to be talking about the
But
brain.
again, I don't think they knew about the brain.
Okay, but like when you're reading this, do you think that the brain is the answer to what he's talking about?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, it is. To an extent.
Yeah, okay.
So he is now going to sort of differentiate what happens in the mind. He's going to tackle, okay, there must be something going on besides just the sense organs.
Yeah.
What is that thing and how do we divide it? So we're on to chapter 3.
Cool.
The nature of imagination.
Cool.
So he says, thinking and perceiving must not be the same thing, right?
Okay.
Perceiving something as white is not the same as thinking. And here's why. Your perception is always true, right?
Interesting.
Anything that comes in through your senses, even if you may think the wrong thing about that, it never lies to you. You never see white when in reality
Colorblind.
you're actually seeing gray. Yes, but what is coming through your eyeballs is always the same, right? It's not going to.
It's correct to me, right? Like, but other people might see something different.
Other people might see something
Okay.
different, and maybe he didn't know much about colorblindness. But
Just curious. That was the. Yeah.
in any case,
Yeah.
there you can't like see a thing that's green and think, that is false,
Right.
It's just green.
You're just receiving that
You're
information.
just receiving that
Yeah,
information,
sure,
and
sure.
the information is always true. It's not like, yes, you might think something wrong about that thing, that say I see a thing and think it's green when in fact it's under some lights and it's actually a different color. Well,
Right.
I'm still receiving green, right? That's still true.
That makes sense.
Thinking, though, can be false.
Yes, for sure.
I can think the wrong thing. I can be in error. And he says perceiving is enjoyed by all animals, right? All animals see stuff.
Right.
They feel stuff, they do stuff. Thinking, though, only by the rational. But imagination is different from both those things. So here's how imagination works. It is clear, however, that perceiving and understanding are not the same. For while all animals have a share of the former, only a few have a share of the latter, right? Everything can feel stuff,
Right.
but you're not going to see a grub worm that is thinking deep thoughts about all the things he's perceiving. And as for thinking, which can be both correct and incorrect, correct through being understanding, knowledge, and true opinion, incorrect through their opposites, not even this is the same as perceiving. For the perception of special sensibles is always true and is enjoyed by all animals, while thinking admits of being false and is enjoyed by no animal that does not have rationality. For imagination is a different thing from both perceiving and thinking. Imagination cannot occur without perception, nor supposition without imagination. So you can't have imagination without perception. You can't have thinking or supposition without perception. It's kind of a base requisite for both.
Sure.
Like I can't think without seeing stuff.
Right.
But it's not the same thing because it must be something different.
Okay.
Now, imagination is the capacity to bring forward an image that does not exist. So I can think about a truck with chicken legs, right? Do you guys have it?
Oh, it's in my brain. I can see it.
Yeah.
Did you perceive that thing?
It's on the road.
I perceive it in my brain.
And when you hit the horn, it goes. So you can imagine this thing,
Yes.
and you have never seen this, a chicken truck, right?
Correct.
And so there must be something happening here. Would you say that that is a true or false thing?
I hope it's true,
Maybe. Okay. Well, here's the other
but
thing.
it's
is
a false thing.
Yeah, it's probably a false thing. And it's different also from belief. Oh, are we there yet? Oh, so yes, but okay. So it's different from belief because belief, you cannot have a thing without the accompanying emotion. So when I believe a thing is scary and I see that scary thing, I'm going to feel scared.
Yeah.
Right? Can you imagine a scary thing and not feel scared?
I can imagine. Sure. I feel like I could imagine the concept of a scary thing and not feel scared.
But if I'm not scared by it, it's not scary. I don't know if that's where we're going with
But
it.
the thing, if it were real, if
Would
you
be
believed
scary.
that this
Yeah,
thing
yeah,
was
yeah.
real and living in your closet,
That would be very
you would
scary.
feel fear,
Yeah,
right?
for
If there
sure.
was an evil chicken truck that
Yeah.
tried to chew your toes off every
Yeah,
night,
yeah.
living in your closet,
Scary.
you believed it, you'd
Very-
be scared.
very scared.
But
Yes.
I can imagine that thing all day.
Not be
in
scared.
fact, it's kind of funny.
It is very funny.
So it must be different than strict belief, right?
Yep.
Belief always brings an accompanying emotion. Imagination doesn't. I can imagine all kinds of things that might be funny and not laugh, things that might be scary, not feel scared, things that might be pretty and not feel amorous feelings, right?
But if you believe in it, then the emotion is there.
Exactly.
Gotcha.
Then that thing would be real. So it must be different than belief, and both of these are different than perceiving. So you have perceiving,
That's right.
and then you have kinds of thinking, which are supposing, which is belief, and imagining. You guys with me?
I'm tracking.
Okay. So he gives a list of arguments, and there's kind of a funny bit here that I actually had to have a conversation with some folks about, and we'll get there.
Okay.
So he gives like 5 reasons why we know that imagination is not the same as perception. So imagination is not the same as perception is clear from the following arguments. 1, perception is either a potentiality or an activity, as for instance, our sight and seeing. So you can either, like, you might be able to see, and you can also actively see. Yet there are appearances in the absence of either of these, such as the appearances in sleep. So for example, I see things when I'm sleeping that aren't really there.
Yeah.
So it must be different
Like
than,
a dream?
than perception. So that's reason number 1.
I had a crazy dream last night.
What'd you have?
So I was by myself in New York City. Amanda was somewhere else. And I just remember feeling melancholy in my dream. And I had to go find dinner. And I was in New York and I had to go eat. And I was like kind of bummed that I was going to be eating by myself. And the only restaurant I could find, every time I went to a restaurant, it was a TGI Fridays. And
So you went to hell.
I had to go to TGI
You were in
Fridays.
hell.
I had to go to TGI Fridays in New York City for dinner, but I kept every time I came in, I was like, the girl's like, "Welcome to TGI Fridays." I would be like, "Can I have a table for one, please?" And the girl in the dream said that because it was so late at night, they were only serving.
Parties?
No, they were only serving
Like groups of
dessert.
people? Okay.
And so I had to have like a comically large sundae for dinner alone at the bar at TGI Fridays in New York City. That was my dream. I woke up.
I feel like you need to make this into a short story. Like, this is so strange.
And
Or
I-
like a short film. I would
Yeah.
watch that.
There
movie.
was, and I just, there was just such a, I feel like it was like one of those like French ennui movies. Like I just had this feeling of existential dread when I woke up. I was just like, that was awful.
It's like when you sit down to the sun, it's like all around me are familiar faces, worn out places.
Exactly. I was just like,
worn out
I think I had like a big
places.
red plastic spoon to eat my sundae with at the bar at TGI Fridays.
Was it comically long?
Yeah, no, it was comically long, but it had like mountains
large,
of whipped cream
Yeah.
and like the comically large cherry on
Yeah.
top. And anyway,
Did you stare forlornly
I don't,
straight ahead?
I don't remember that. Probably.
Okay. Well, let's say yes.
Anyway, that was my dream.
Okay.
Now, so what does Aristotle say about that?
Freud next episode. Yeah.
Well, he says that just shows your imagination. Buddy.
Yeah.
All right. Number 2, perception is, but imagination is not always present.
Okay.
Right. You're always having things come in through your
Right.
eyeballs when you're awake, but
you're not always.
not necessarily always imagining stuff. Sometimes you're just out there doing things.
Still thinking about that truck though with the chicken legs. That's still that's going to haunt me.
Yeah, but there are times when you won't be thinking about it.
I think. Okay, maybe.
Those are going to be less times than there was yesterday.
Okay, so that's reason number 2. Let's see. And if it were sorry, I was going to jump a section. And if it were inactivity that there were the same, it would be possible for all animals to have imagination. But it is held that while an ant and bee do, the grub does not have imagination.
Why?
Okay, he doesn't give a why.
Oh.
But can you guys imagine a reason why an ant and a bee would be considered to be imaginative, while a grub would not?
They
Give it
build.
a second.
They build.
They build.
Cool. Wow. Okay.
That's what I came up with because they have structures.
They're looking at a blank canvas. They're like,
What can
this
we
would
do
be a
with this?
friggin' great hive.
Yeah.
Exactly. They have to be able to imagine a structure that does not yet exist and then be able to build that structure. And so for the same reason, I think there's a variety of insects we could say have imagination.
With their little ant blueprints and their little bee white hats.
Yep. Termites.
Termites.
They
yeah.
build.
Okay, yeah.
They have those big hive things.
My dog doesn't build.
No.
Your dog has no imagination.
No imagination.
Are you bummed about this?
In fact, they actually, we talked about this. We had a dog named Gladys that started chasing an imaginary thing around the house. And she would see it and she would growl at it and run around and chase it. And we went to the doctor and the doctor said, dogs do not have imaginations. This is some sort of like psychotic break that your dog is having and seeing imaginary things. But dogs cannot have fun imaginary playtime. So
Okay.
it's weird, right?
That's very weird because our dog will stare up at the ceiling and kind of like act as if there's something on the ceiling, and we call it ceiling monsters because he's like
That's
walking
like a
around
thing
looking at the ceiling.
For cats, there's like a ghost
there?
that cats are supposed to be like staring at
Yeah.
whenever they just stare off into the distance like that.
Oh, weird.
Terrifying.
I don't know if there's a dog
Well,
one
I'm not
too.
sleeping tonight.
Sorry about that.
But I don't know what to believe about ants because there are certain ants that will build small ant bridges across things. So they have to have some sort of, if I hold on to my buddy's antenna, that's, if I hold on to my buddy's antenna, we're going to get across this
Yeah,
sucker.
but they can't be that smart because they can like walk in a circle to death.
Yeah. So I don't know what to believe about those.
Yeah.
Anyway, that was my guess, is
Cool.
that they build things. All right. Number 3. While perceivings are always veridical, and I had to look that up, it means true in real life. While perceivings are always true, imaginings are, for the most part, false. Number 4. It is not when we are in a state of accurate activity in connection with the sense object that we say, this appears to me as a man, but rather whenever we do not clearly perceive whether it is a real or illusory man.
Okay.
I don't know what that means.
Don't know.
Yep. Number 5, as we said above, visions appear even to those whose eyes are shut. So it
Yeah,
must be different
totally.
than perception, right?
Yeah,
Because you can still
sure.
have visions. Okay. And imagination is also different from belief. For conviction follows belief, which is a task of reason, and animals don't have reason, right? You believe a thing, you are convicted about it, you want to continue to pursue that thing. That is an act of reason, right? I think this is true, therefore I will do a thing about it. Act of reason. So belief and imagination, not the same thing. I don't know how much I buy that.
What about like when your dog comes up to you and he's like, if I sit,
Your dog is talking to you?
if I no,
Incredible.
if your dog comes up and sits and is very good, he believes he's going to get a treat.
That's not reason though. That's
No.
like
That's just
automatic
like,
response.
Oh, okay.
Isn't that classical conditioning?
Like
Yeah, I don't
Pavlovian.
know. Yeah, he says that conviction is, as it is not possible for those that hold beliefs not to be convinced of the things. While none of the animals have conviction, many of them have imagination. So ants and bees can build, but they don't necessarily have a conviction about a belief.
Right.
But I don't know how he proves that or how he gathers that.
How could it be otherwise? I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure. Anyway, I find some of his other arguments pretty convincing that,
good.
that
Okay.
imagination and sense perception are not the exact same thing.
Sure,
so
makes
we have
sense.
some
That's fair.
other faculty that animals do not have.
Gotcha.
We have imagination, like,
Are you on board for this?
We
I
can
thought-
also talk.
Yeah.
well, so can animals have some sort of language.
Yeah, but not as, I mean, like, not as complicated as my language.
I don't think so,
As
right?
our language.
I mean, what about bee dances? They have like body language.
Sure, I can dance too.
You can dance as good as any bee.
You've never led me to a patch of flowers while you're
I
dancing.
can dance as good as any bee.
You're not paying close enough attention, AJ.
Yeah,
That's,
apparently not.
Yeah, Graham's doing a great job.
Okay, so anyway, we have imagination. Most animals do not.
Catch more flies with honey.
He also says imagination is movement coming from the activity of sense perception, meaning all of this comes from our senses, right? We can't really have imagination without these things. It's not a separate deal, but it works upon everything that's come through our senses. Okay, so that's sort of like our first movement into the soul of man, which is that we have thinking and belief, and we also have imagination. Gotcha. And those things are separate from the senses and sort of bring them all together, is my understanding. Good so far?
Good so far.
Okay. Number 4 is what is intellect. This is where we get a little bit into the weeds.
Oh,
What have we been doing so
well,
far?
You guys thought that was the hard bit?
oh, is this
You, you tender
through
babes.
the tulips?
Okay.
I'm just imagining you angrily reading this, like in preparation.
I sat there and I was like,
What is this?
I don't. And the funny thing is, I would look at the footnotes to understand it, and I was like, I don't even understand the footnote. This doesn't make any flipping sense. And I just got angrier and angrier and felt more embarrassed. And then even the commentator in a couple of the chapters says,
Clearly.
this chapter is fairly disorganized. And I was like, are you killing me? I don't know how to put this together.
Isn't this, don't you think any consolation that these were just his lecture notes?
Is that true for this also?
I don't know.
I thought it was true for all
I've heard
of
that
us.
rumor,
right.
but I don't
We
know
don't
if that's
have any-
actually true. How do we know this?
Well, it was definitely true for Nicomachean Ethics.
Ethics.
Was it?
Yeah,
Okay.
For sure.
Because that's why it's called that. Nicomachus was a student, wasn't it? Or was it a kid?
I thought it was
Well,
his kid. His son.
Because there's a question of what it means, because he does have a son, but there's another meaning attached to it. I'd have to look it up,
Yeah.
but it could be the person taking notes.
Okay. Well,
I'm so sorry. I know.
I'm sorry. This thing
doing a
is.
great
Hamburg's
job.
cracking the cold ones now. Yeah.
There's a couple of chapters
in the towel.
that I just have question marks by.
Okay,
like
cool.
I just,
Awesome.
it's just question marks.
Cool.
It doesn't seem relevant. So I'm trying to give you guys the straight dope, the good
We're
stuff.
sophisticated men of leisure. We can figure it out.
Yes, I believe in us.
Intellect
Uh-oh.
is the potential for thought.
Okay.
No internal appearance that would affect that from without. So before it thinks, it must not be any of the things that exist. So it must not be mixed with the body. So my brain can comprehend all the things that exist. And because it can't be already one of those things, because you don't want some sort of pre-existing condition. We don't want it to be blue, because then it wouldn't be able to perceive certain things. And we don't want it to be a chicken truck, because then I guess perception of other things would be a little bit goofy. So it has to be the potential for thought unmixed with a body. And I think this is where it gets a little weird, and where modern science would say, I don't know that that's necessarily true. You can be a brain and still perceive brains.
Oh, that's interesting. I guess I'm not following. Like, is he trying to say there's something behind that? Like that he's hypothesizing? So there's like something behind the brain that is allowing the perception?
Well, again, I don't think he knows about the brain.
Right, in the first place.
But he's kind of saying that there's something back there that isn't mixed with the body
Yeah.
and is something else that allows us to perceive and imagine all of these things.
Because if it was mixed with the body, it wouldn't be able to perceive it.
It
Is
would
kinda
be
like-
almost like tainted, right? If so, it would have quality, like hot or cold, or have some organ like a perceptive faculty, which we know to be the brain, right? I think this is another one of those like
Well,
whoopses.
but maybe he's talking about consciousness, right?
Right.
Because you can have brain like.
Okay, that's a different thing. We're getting there. Consciousness is different
Okay.
than what he's kind of highlighting right now. He's kind of saying there must be something that is unmixed with the world because it can perceive all things in the world, right? I think he might be wrong here. But he
Bold
says,
statement.
but he says here, this is the place of forms, right? Where you can think, okay, I know what a table is. It's unmixed. I'm not a table. My brain is not a table, but I can see that thing and say, yes, that fits my category for table.
Right.
If we're talking about modern philosophy, we might say it is the place where you hold all of the categories of things, right? The human perception is the business of categorization. We see a thing, we say that's a thing I like. It is also a cat. It is also a furry thing. We just put it under all these categories. I think he's saying this is where that exists.
Okay.
So
scratchy.
maybe like memory. Maybe we could think of it kind of like memory. Does that make sense?
Okay.
So unmixed with the world, it's something else. Again, I think now we would say it exists in the brain. I don't think he would. And then he says it's different from other faculties in that it isn't destroyed or desensitized by excess. So your eyeballs
Can be destroyed.
will
by
be
too much
destroyed
light.
by too much light.
Yeah.
or will have problems with too much dark.
Yeah.
Your taste, I don't know how you destroy it with taste, but too much
Too much
spice,
salt, yeah,
too much
something
salt.
That Sunday at TGI Fridays.
Yeah, that'll rip you up, man. Or touch, I think if you're just beaten to death,
Yeah,
I think it's
yeah,
a
that'd be what
solution,
it is,
right?
yeah.
Hit.
But he's saying you can't perceive too much to break it?
No.
Well,
in the sense organs, you can. Too much sound, too high or too low
sure,
is going to mess up your ears. But with thought,
There's not too much thought.
thinking a really big thought does not diminish the small ones. In fact, sometimes it makes them more peaked, right? It makes them sharper. So he says it's a little bit different than anything else like that.
What's the biggest thought you can think?
God, I don't like. What do you?
I'm just saying, like,
I don't know.
What do you say when you talk about big thoughts and small thoughts? What's the difference? What is that?
You mean like actually think of big things? Like
He doesn't.
thinking-
He doesn't say.
Okay.
He just says when you think a grand or a big thought, then it doesn't make the small thoughts any different.
okay.
So I don't know
Like
if
shower thoughts?
Yes.
maybe he's just thinking all these things, and he's like, clearly I can still think about ducks.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
I am crushing it here, and it's not destroying my ability to think.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Okay, and then there's a section where I just have question mark, huh, question mark, and this is, I think, the part where he starts talking about a point being divisible and indivisible, and so you have a line, there's a point in the middle,
Yeah.
it isn't divided,
Yeah, correct.
but you can imagine it divided.
Could be, but it's not.
But it's
actually.
not divided.
Yeah, exactly.
But it could be.
Could be, but it's not.
But it's not.
Yeah.
No
of course.
question marks for maybe. He's got it down.
Yeah, but I don't know how that relates to the soul, so I just put question mark, huh, and moved on.
Cool. Great.
Okay, I'm going to read you all of chapter 5.
Well, is he trying to prove that, like,
Dude, don't even...
Graham, what are you doing?
Not
Stop.
not useful to try, my guy. There's no point here.
Back off, Graham. What are
Yeah,
you-
my. I can't help
I
you.
want to think big
If
thoughts.
you ask a question, I will not be able to help you through it. Like I promise you.
Just
Do you
let
want me to read the
I,
section?
I want to push the bounds of
Just
knowledge.
let him be done. Let him.
Let me cook, Donaldson. Do you want me to read the section?
I just want to know what it means.
Yes, the answer is yes. He wants to hear it. Is it long?
Let me see if I can find it. Okay.
I want to go deep in the lore. Let's go for it.
Sounds
Okay,
terrible.
you guys ready to this?
Born
Yeah.
ready.
This is why there are question mark,
Okay,
question mark, huh.
just don't read it fast. Sometimes read fast.
I know, I do. I get excited. Now, size and to be size are not the same, nor water and to be water. And
What are you saying? To be?
As in,
To be water.
potential water.
And so with many other things, though not with all, as in some cases they are the same. And so we discern the being of flesh and flesh either by something else or by something in a different state.
Yeah.
For flesh, far from being without matter, is like the snub, a this in a that. It is then with the perceptive faculty that we discern warmth and coldness, and those things of which flesh is the formula, but with something else that we discern being flesh, and this is either separate or related to the perceptive faculty in the way that a bent line is related to itself when straightened. And again, in the case of those things that exist in abstraction, the straight line is like the snub in requiring extension. But what it is to be straight, if straightness and being straight are not the same, is different. Let us call this duality. And this we judge either with something else or with the faculty in a different state. In the way, then, that the things are separable from matter in general, in that way are the things connected with the intellect.
Is that the entire section?
There's more.
Sounds.
Do you want
Riveting.
the more?
No, I definitely
No,
don't.
probably not.
Tell me you got something.
There's this relationship between these different organs, right? Like the line and the bent line.
He was saying, like, okay, hot and cold is perceived by the flesh,
Incredible.
right?
No.
Oh.
I don't think that's
No,
what
he said hot and cold, and something about the flesh being the what is it called? The formula?
hot and cold didn't come into this. Are you
You
thinking
said hot and
size and to be size?
No,
No,
he
at
said
the
hot
end.
and cold
that's how we-
is perceived by the flesh with it, which is its formula or something like that.
I guess.
I don't know.
Anyway,
Yeah.
let's move on.
Let's move on.
Yeah, this is why like question mark, huh.
Yeah.
It doesn't I couldn't track. There's so much abstraction and so much it sounds like I'm overhearing 20% of a conversation and don't have reference for all the things.
Yeah.
Okay. However, chapter 5 is discernible.
Is delightful.
Is delightful. And this is kind of where he brings this is what soul is. This is part of it.
Let's do it.
That's chapter 5, and then I'm also going to read all of chapter 8. Don't worry, they're pretty short. Okay, chapter 5. It's like half a page. Now, in all nature, there is for each genus something that is its matter, and it is this that is all those things in potentiality, and something else that is their cause, productive of them in virtue of bringing them all about. As, for instance, a skill stands towards the matter it uses. All right, this does actually make sense. So for everything that exists, there is the matter and something that caused it.
Okay,
so if I've got like a chicken truck,
Yep.
that's the matter, and there must have been something that made my chicken truck.
Someone
right?
did it. Some creative genius.
Yeah, some creative genius made a giant chicken, chopped off the legs, stapled them to the truck, and then put like a what do they call it? A wattle on the top. Yeah. But that's a turkey thing. The wattle. What's the comb?
Fan.
They put the comb up there.
Yeah, the comb.
Right? So there is a cause. No less in the soul, then, must these different features occur. And indeed, there is an intellect characterized by the capacity to become all things, or I think we would probably call it memory, and an intellect characterized by that to bring all things about, and to bring them about in just the way that a state, like light, does. For, in a way, light also makes things that are potentially colors in actuality. So you have the potential matter of thought, and then you have the active thought piece, the active intellect, right, that brings those things about, like light does.
Okay.
Now, this latter intellect is separate, unaffected, and unmixed, being in substance activity. So it is the activity of thought, bringing all those memories to the forefront and making things in the mind. He doesn't explain it very well, but this is my understanding of it, right? You've got all this potential, the potential to imagine chicken truck, and then the thing that says, yes, now we are imagining chicken truck. We're going to take chicken, we're going to take truck, we're going to combine those two things together, and that's what we are up to. That activity is what he's talking about, the active soul. It's the cause.
Okay.
For in all cases, that which acts is superior to that which is affected, and the principle to its matter. So he says, this is the superior soul, the active one. And while knowledge in the actualized state is identical with the fact known, knowledge in the state of potentiality, though temporally prior in the individual case, does not in general even have temporal priority. Not entirely clear.
Yep.
Nor is it the case that the intellect is now thinking, now not. It is further in its separate state that the intellect is just that which it is, and it is this alone, and here's the kicker, that is immortal and eternal, though we have no memory, as the separate intellect is unaffected, while the intellect that is affected is perishable, and in any case, thinks nothing without the other. So you have your memory,
Yep.
and you have your active soul.
Okay.
Now, the memory can be destroyed,
Sure.
right? You bonk your head, you forget stuff. The active soul, he says, this is the thing that is eternal,
Okay.
right? The thing that selects from your memory, brings them to the forefront, and does things. Now, this is where we get into the realm where we actually don't know if this is true. And like, I don't think we have a full enough understanding of the brain to say that he's wrong. So if you are wondering where the eternal soul was going to come from, we talked about monism last time, that the soul is just part of the body. It's the form of the body. He says, this is the piece. This is the piece that cannot be destroyed. It is your active soul, the one that draws from the memory and brings it together. And he says, this memory isn't even any good without this active soul. But it is eternal, meaning that apparently we have no memory when we get to eternity. Like we are blissful, happy, active souls, but without the memory of what we were as a body. Does that kind of make sense?
Kind of sad.
That's sad. I don't know that, and here's where my,
Is
non-Christian
that like
listeners,
the river?
the river Leth,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
You forget everything.
Yeah.
So that kind of makes sense to me. So if you are a Christian listener, and we're going to get into Christianity a little bit here. So if you're not a Christian, this may not interest you as much, but this is where we are making a statement that science cannot yet disprove, and that's that the active soul, the one that runs things. Now, the way that I have been thinking about it all day.
This isn't consciousness?
Well, this would be consciousness.
This would be the consciousness.
Yeah, this
Okay.
is consciousness. This is the thing that stays. So your ability to think of yourself as you, to move about in the memories of your mind, this is the eternal soul. Now, I don't know that science has a good answer for this yet without an eternal soul. And I think maybe, like, I don't want to make an appeal to ignorance and say because we don't have evidence, it must
aliens.
not exist,
Yeah.
right? But right now, science has not said, here is the active soul. To me, if I think of the mind as a computer, and many people make that analogy, that the mind is a computer. Well, computers don't really do much without some agent banging on the keys, right? There has to be something directing a computer's activity. Open the browser, go to Facebook or go to X and look at all Beyonce's tweets.
Yes.
Right? There is something that is selecting from the memory of the computer and bringing those things to the forefront. Now, how that happens in the mind is still unknown. So if you are looking for a place to locate the human soul, I think this is it. This is the thing that escapes, right? Say a person drowns.
Oh.
The body is the same.
Yep.
I didn't do any research on this. I don't know if cell death in the brain happens over those 2 minutes. It might just be lack of oxygen and all those cells die. But a quick death, and if the cells are the same, this is the thing that has gone.
Yeah.
Right? Is that directing agency, that consciousness that is out. Does that kind of make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. This is probably one of the more controversial spots. Thoughts. What do you guys think?
Is this the breath that is breathed into Adam?
I would guess.
Yeah.
I think that's just thinking back on our conversation last time of like, is the brain the soul? Like, are those the same things? Is one just like a more poetic reference to the other? I think the question you're asking is the one I've had bouncing around my head of, the moment before death and the moment after death, the body's virtually the same, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
But something clearly has happened in that body. What is that?
This active soul has departed.
And that's how this would answer. And again, anytime that I just find it like the kind of exploration of the existence of a soul, and this isn't a religious document. This is like a philosophical document that he's trying to explore. And I guess again, there are differences here from like a theological position of what the soul is, but just that he reasons into a soul. I always find that interesting when, again, here he's talking about the soul. Elsewhere, he'll reason into why there must be a God. I think that's interesting. I appreciate when we kind of bring things up like that.
Well, granted, he reasoned into a lot of other stuff too.
That's fair too. That was not great that we do not stick with, for sure. But,
yeah, some stuff that we are not on board with, and we may eventually come across.
Like some people are just born to be ruled.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not great.
Yeah, and I mean, eventually, sure, science might discover that organ that is the active soul, and this is the thing that moves things. But even then, it's hard to say exactly what would prompt that to action, right? Does that kind of make sense?
Sure.
I mean, you could maybe point to chemical interactions, but... So sure, yeah, we may eventually find the thing that says this is the active soul. We can remove it. There's still memory. The body will still react to certain memories certain ways, and there's no real consciousness there. But I don't think we have yet. And if you are, a brain scientist out there and you're like, au contraire, push up your glasses, we'd love to hear from you.
Because if I don't believe in free will, isn't there no contradiction here? Like, if I don't think that there's anyone behind, if I think everything is just reaction that's like built into people from the beginning, isn't there no need for a soul to persist? Like, there's no thing behind the perception or the response. Like, it is all just body.
Yeah, but that's the thing is we don't know if it's all just body.
Yeah, sure.
Yet.
Yeah.
So I've been doing thinking. I don't know if I brought this up last time, but I've been doing a lot of thinking about life.
It's heavy.
No, not like my life, just like the actual what life is.
Okay.
And we talked a little bit about it last time. The one thing I was thinking of is that everything that currently exists is in an unbroken line of life.
Yeah.
Right? My life has been bestowed from elsewhere.
Yeah.
And if I give life to something else, it came from me. Right? So whatever, if you're an evolutionist or a creationist, either way, since the first motions of life, it is unbroken. Right? That is an unbroken chain from then till now. And this is where we get into Christianity again, unless you're thinking about Jesus Christ. He is the only and sole instance of unbequeathed life, including Adam. Adam received his life from the Godhead.
I guess
He was a baby.
He was a baby, right?
Yes,
He was
but then
born-
he died. The resurrection is that point where the life is self-bequeathed. Mary didn't bring him back up.
Sorry. Yes, got it.
Right, so he was unbroken through until the resurrection.
Yeah,
Even
yeah.
the other people that are raised in the Bible were raised by virtue of someone else's life, right?
What about Lazarus?
Jesus rose him up.
Oh.
He gave that life back.
What about the dead kid with Elijah? I guess Elijah did it.
Yeah. Like again, all life, save solely the resurrection,
But wouldn't you say
has
God
been
raised him?
elsewhere bequeathed. I mean, you
The
could.
same way that you would say that God raised Lazarus?
Yeah, but in this case, you'd say it was since he is God, it was God self-raised, right? So if that is the truth, then the only real pure life that is self-bestowed is that in the Godhead, which
Okay,
kind of
so
checks out.
what does that change? What does that add to Aristotle's conversation about this?
Oh, nothing. I just think it's cool. I just brought it up because it's a fun idea,
Fine.
right? That is the only instance we know of self-bequeathed life.
That's right. Okay.
Because even if God has been eternally existing, there was no point at which he declared life for himself.
Gotcha.
Right? Whereas in the resurrection, he did. Kind of cool. Kind of just a fun thought I stumbled across.
Yep.
Okay, how are we doing on time?
Don't know.
Let's find out. 13. All right, we got a little more time. Let's go a little further. Okay, so we did all of chapter 5, and then 6 and 7 make no sense.
Cool.
I just have stuff, and I don't think they're entirely useful, so we're going to read chapter 8, which is the definition of the soul. You guys still with me?
Yeah, we're still with you.
Is chapter 7 very short? I'm wondering if I have the right text pulled up, or if these are just summaries.
No, chapter 7's a little long.
Oh, never mind. Okay.
Okay, chapter 8, though, is fairly short. And it gives us a summary of what we may have missed in the chapters I skipped.
Yeah.
So, but now, by way of summing up what has been said about the soul, let us repeat that the soul is, in a way, all the things that exist. Right? You are potential. You have all the forms inside your mind, and you can recognize all the things that exist. Right?
Okay.
I can make those images true to myself. For all the things that exist are objects either of perception or of thought. And knowledge is, in a way, the things that are known. Perception, in a way, the things that are perceived. So in your soul, the only way to get stuff into your soul is you know it, and that's the thing there, and then the way you get it in there is by perception. But we must inquire how this is so. Knowledge, then, and perception are divided in relation to their objects. They in their potential state corresponding to the objects in their potential state. And in the same correspondence, obtaining between the actualized states. And I think he's going to give an analogy here that'll help. I could be wrong. And the perceptive and cognitive faculties of the soul are also those of thought. Now, it must be either the things themselves that the faculties potentially are or their forms. And as it is obviously not the things themselves, since clearly stone, for instance, is not in the soul, it must rather be the form of stone in the soul. So it's like the potential of the thing. It's the form of stone, not the actual stone that is rankling around and bonking around inside your body.
Right.
There is thus an analogy between the soul and the hand. The hand is a tool of tools, the intellect a form of forms, and the sense a form of sense objects. So the hand is a tool of tools. It will do all the tool stuff, whereas the mind is a form of forms. Your mind, your soul, is like a gathering together of all the souls of the universe, right? Your perception is a gathering together of all the possible perceptions that you can get. Does that kind of make sense? You guys following?
Yeah.
And since there is...
Sounds kind of woo-woo, though.
Yeah, I don't know he's wrong, though.
My soul's gathering all the souls of the universe?
No, all the
What is
forms,
this,
like
Burning
forms.
Man? Oh, okay.
Forms, meaning like, I understand a table because I have the idea of table in my head.
Gotcha.
Right? And there is nothing you can think of that isn't part of the forms in your mind.
Okay.
Right? You've got categories in there for everything. And if there's no category for it, you're just like, well, I don't know what that is.
All right.
Right? You guys with me so far?
I'm with you.
And since there is, as it is thought, no separable things apart from perceptible sizes, this is where it might get confusing, the objects of thought are in the forms that are perceived, both those that are spoken of as in abstraction and those that are conditions and affections of the objects of perception. I don't know if the rest is useful. Yeah, he's just talking about images as sense data without matter. Okay, so that's the soul. The soul is just like the form of forms. It gathers together all the form of stuff in the universe.
Okay.
Then he kind of goes to the parts of the soul, and he says, look, we can keep on cutting down the parts of the soul, right? In the intellect, you can have a bunch of different intellects. In the imagination, you can have different types. We could keep on going, but here's the stuff. So he says, this is chapter 9. There's the nutritive part, which is present both in plants and all animals. So you grow. There's the perceptive part, which could not easily be given either as rational or irrational. You're just perceiving.
Okay.
Then there's the imaginative part. Though it is different from all the parts in its way of being what it is, it's very problematic on the assumption of separate parts of the soul with which it is to be identified and from distinguished. In addition to these, there's the desiderative part, your desires, seemingly both conceptually and potentially distinct from all.
Okay.
So you can imagine things, but the desire of those things seems to be separate from your imagining of it.
Okay.
There's perception and there's growth, right? And I think all of this is leading up to his what causes motion question. So remember, the soul is supposed to do a few things. It's supposed to cause motion. I forget the others. It's supposed to perceive. I think those are the big things, perceive and cause motion.
Right.
And so he's like, okay, what is it exactly that causes motion? And he points out that, well, must have imagination and desire. It's not nutritive, right? If it's just nutrition, then plants would be moving around better than they are,
Okay.
right? You have to be able to imagine something and desire it, right? If you can imagine it, then you can want it. It's not just perception, because some animals perceive but remain stationary, right? They don't clearly want stuff. You touch a sea anemone, it's going to pull in its little doodles, but we don't see it actively going out to get things, right? It doesn't.
A what?
A sea anemone.
You've sea enemies?
Sea anemone.
Oh.
What do you call them?
I have no idea what you're talking about. I grew up in the prairies.
You don't know sea anemones?
No, what is it?
So, it's like one of those little sea slugs that got all that thing.
Oh. It looks like a troll doll.
Showing a picture of a sea anemone to Graham for the first time.
There you go.
Yeah.
You touch it and it
It
around?
will react, but it doesn't clearly want anything. It's not being a go-getter.
It wants you to stop touching it, apparently.
Yeah, maybe. And this is where I might disagree with some of his conclusions, but he says there are some things that perceive, right? They can tell you're there, but they don't really clearly want anything, right? Like I think a Venus flytrap would count here.
But they want flies?
They react to a fly being there, but they're not like reaching for flies. They just sort of closes, right? It's a reaction that happens.
This was a question we got, because didn't we say that motion is like a part of the soul? So if they're making motion, do they have souls?
Well, plants do have, we call it heliotaxis. They grow towards the sun, and they will move towards the sun, like sunflowers.
My sunflowers move around all the time.
Exactly. But do sunflowers feel desire? Not really. So desire must be different than perception, is what I'm saying. Okay. Like there must be something else.
Okay.
But I can tell if my plants are happy.
Sure.
Can you?
Great.
You a plant whisperer? What's happening?
No, you can tell happy plants. I can tell when my plants are happy.
Like when they don't get enough water, they kind of get droopy.
Yeah.
Like
My habanero plant, if I don't give it enough water, its leaves get sad.
Oh, that's
and it kind of droops.
That's a bummer.
Yeah, and then when I water it, it goes bloop, and then lifts its shoulders
better,
again.
yeah.
It's really, really sweet. Okay, so he says intellect doesn't do it alone. You can think about things and then not go after them, right? Even if the thing seems desirable. And desire doesn't do it itself, because I can desire something and my intellect will say, no, 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 stay away. Right. So motion must be some sort of combination of these. But he says, really the thing seems to be desire, right? I can think about a lot of things, but desire is the thing that really gets me going. And so the desiderative faculty, my capacity to want things, is that thing that gives motion.
Gotcha.
Right? Yes, it can't really function without the intellect, but just the intellect isn't going to make you move, right? It has to be that capacity to desire. And he says it's three things in concert making this happening. The good that can be done, that's number one. Like you see a good, and I think this is recognized by intellect. He doesn't say it, but I think that's the deal. And then the faculty of desire is like, ooh, that's a good thing. I should go after that thing that I just imagined. And then the animal moves its bodily functions, body, soul together, goes after the thing. So this is his final explanation. You're not made of fire or by air motes or whatever the other explanations were in few episodes ago. That's not how movement works. It's you see a thing with your intellect that seems good, you want that thing, that desiderative faculty, the capacity to desire, and then you move forward.
Toward it, yeah.
Yeah. The last few chapters are sort of only...
So he says the soul is the will?
He's pointing out that the thing that makes motion is desire, right? He's trying to answer that question, what is it in the soul that moves a person, right?
Yeah.
People were claiming it was fire and water, or fire and air and motes
he's
and
saying
magic
it's
things.
Desire.
It's desire.
It's like it's desire, man, and it's not strict intellect. It's a capacity that you have to want stuff.
So is it the appetitive part of man?
I think
Yeah.
that's a fair assumption.
Okay.
Yeah, the appetitive part. And then he talks about animals that possess only touch, and that all animals must have a nutritive soul, and then 13. The rest is sort of like scientific considerations we don't really care about anymore, because we just understand anatomy and science better. So, takeaways, I think talking about the eternal faculty of the soul is that one, it's not memory, it's that thing that selects from memory. We would call it consciousness, right? You can sit down and say, I'm going to think about cats and cats painting pictures. And you can select those two things from your memory and guide your brain there. And it is that capacity that's the eternal soul. I think that's where you finally sort of end up. Motion doesn't come from air or fire. It's your capacity for desire. And then imagination is different than intellect, which is all different from perception, right? I think that's the big takeaways here. And also, don't read this.
I was going to say,
is
should
the
anyone
last
read this
thing.
book? Yeah.
Apparently there are commentaries that I just didn't get to. One is by Thomas Aquinas. I wonder if that would make more sense. And it just seems like to fully understand this, I would have to read 6 other books that sort of lay the groundwork for some of the terminology he uses, and then also read commentaries. And then also, sometimes Aristotle's just not a very good writer. Like there's so many ethereals, and he doesn't give any examples and any analogies to help you pick it apart. And he's using so much jargon from those early arguments that I just can't parse it.
You're not going to do that? You're going to read the commentaries?
No.
You too busy to learn about the soul?
Yeah. I'm not doing this anymore. I'm all set. I'm all good. I don't know, probably gonna go swimming.
Just take a break. You earned it.
Take a break, man.
You desire it.
It is. I do desire it, and my intellect says it is good.
It's true.
So yeah, that's where I end. I hope this has been at least semi-informative. It's entirely possible that I got a bunch of this stuff wrong, but I think those few takeaways that I highlighted are right. I think I understood those correctly. Yeah, I wouldn't recommend reading it. Maybe read a quick commentary, or you know what? Better yet, find a great lecture on YouTube that kind of connects this to all the other things. I found a few that looked pretty good. I didn't have the time with my 3 hours this morning to watch a full hour long lecture. Maybe I'll do that before next time. Probably not. Yeah, if I'm honest. So, any last thoughts or questions, boys?
We made it. Good
I
job.
think so. It's pretty good. Well, if you're desiring to get in touch with us, you can email us at Classical Boys. What's our email address? The guys.
The guys.
Classical boys? Classical boys.
The guys at classicalstuff.net. You can find us on the social media network formerly known as Twitter. X.
Mr. X.
Mr. X. It's Classical Stuff on Twitter, but spelled weird. You can patronize us on Patreon, where we do a monthly AMA. We do in between episodes.
I'd say we're also more active on there. If you want to
that's right.
contact
That's
us, we usually
more-
comment on more of our Patreon stuff than our email.
We definitely sort of like pay more attention to the Patreon members. But we try to get back on emails and stuff. But if
try.
you're a Patreon member, we're a lot more better at getting back to you. That's
A lot more better. Yeah.
a lot more better.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that's saying much. This
true.
has
Yeah,
been
it's true.
Yeah, it's
Graham, AJ, and Thomas talking about the soul. And if you're still listening, you're our soul listener. I don't know.
What are you doing?
Well, it's
3 of 5 stars.
yeah.
The puns are not that great.
No, I wasn't rating you. I was just rating the
No, I'm just saying
Our
that like
podcast.
3 of 5.
I just figured that people have turned off by now, and the people that haven't should be rewarded with a little
and
banter.
I was actually
I think they're all
Graham.
listening.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask you a question.
Sure.
Can I attach the recording we made of your goofy intro
Yeah.
here? So if you've made it this far,
You
keep
earned it.
listening.
Yeah.
And you've earned the Easter egg, and this is where you find it.
Fine.
I think it's a great idea.
I think it's a great idea.
Okay. 25 minutes it takes for the oven
Yeah.
to heat up.
That's what I always say.
What's that, Donaldson?
I was telling him, man, we ran out of parchment paper, and she's just wondering how to form the bread into a boule.
Okay.
It's like a bowl.
But make sure that when you're forming into the boule, you are a little more forceful than normal to get all the air out. I forgot to deal with the bread before I left for podcasting.
Gotcha.
Unbelievable.
I know.
Do you want to continue your intro?
Have you been recording this whole thing? That's so incredible.
Yeah. I got Donaldson recording text into his phone.
Not so mean.
That's so messed up.
We can save this for like a Easter egg or something.
Or I might just tack it into
going.
the main episode.
Yeah.
Hi, and welcome to Classical Stuff You Should Know. This is a podcast about invasions of privacy.
Incredible. He's a little
You're
thrown
so
off.
like-
You're really thrown off right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, Classical. So my name is Graham.
Can you keep this up the entire episode? Because this is incredible.
His fury at
He's
being
so
invaded.
mad. Yeah.
All right, let's start it for real.
It's already been
started.
started.
It's recording.
I flat out refuse.
Thomas, do you want to finish his intro for him?
This is Classical Stuff You Should Know. It's a podcast. We talk about boules. I don't know what that was. We talk about bread. Let's do another.
Aw.